and welcome to Sammy's Bookshelf. I'm Sammy and today I am going to be doing a book haul. These are all the books that I've gotten over the past couple months. Some of them I bought for myself as little Christmas presents, and then some I just bought because I wanted to buy books. Okay, so let's get into this book haul. Is actually a book that I bought quite a while ago, and I was actually supposed to show it to you in my last book haul, but I forgot, so I'm going to show it to you now. And that is The Blood of Olympus by Riordan. I bought this from the Book Grocer, which is an Australian bargain bookstore, and I have one really close to my uni. It's literally in the train station where I get off to go to uni, so that is very dangerous. And I saw this in there one day when I went in before a class that I had, and it was this hardcover Blood of Olympus for only $10. So obviously I had to buy it because $10 for a hardcover is an absolute steal. Now this is the last book in the Heroes of Olympus series. Have I read any of the other books or own any of the other books in the Heroes of Olympus series? No. Have I even read the Percy Jackson series, which comes before the Heroes of Olympus? No. But it was $10. And you know, I do intend to read Percy Jackson and also the Heroes of Olympus at some point, so I figured that I was saving money in the long run, and I'm very happy with my purchase, even though it's going to be a very long time till I can actually read this book. The next couple books that I have are a trilogy, and that is the Serpent and Dove trilogy by Shelby Mahurin. I have seen a lot of hype for this trilogy for the past couple of years now. It is a classic fantasy with a enemies to lovers side plot. I believe it follows a character who is a witch and then another character who is a witch hunter, and that is where the enemies to lovers romance comes in. There seems to be a lot of mixed reviews for this series. People either seem to love it or hate it, like there's no in between. So I'm very interested to see what I will think of this trilogy. I know people have said that the second book, Blood and Honey, suffers from middle book syndrome, so I'm interested to see whether I agree with them. I love a good YA fantasy trilogy, so super excited to get to this, hopefully sometime super soon. Next, I have a book that I have already read. It was in my January wrap-up, and that is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by B.E. Schwab. Again, I have already read this book, but I decided to include it in this haul anyway because I did buy it when I also bought Serpent and Dove, and I just also can't miss another opportunity to tell you how much you need to read this book because I loved it. This book is about a girl named Addie LaRue that makes a deal with a god that leaves her immortal, but the downside is that everyone she meets will forget her. And we see Addie LaRue in different parts of her long life as she deals with her gift but also her curse. And then we also meet up with Addie in 2014 when she walks into a bookstore and meets a boy named Henry, who is the first person to remember her in 300 years. This is an amazing book. If you want to hear more of my in-depth thoughts, you can watch my January wrap-up. I go into exactly why I love this book and why you should read it. The next couple books that I'm going to show you are books that I bought so that I can complete my big Cassandra Clare reread, which I've been reading a book a month for almost a year now, and I have 3 more books left in my reread. And so the first book I have to show you is the Bane Chronicles by Cassandra Clare, Rees, Brennan, and Maureen Johnson, and this is a collection of short stories which follows the character of Magnus Bane, who is one of the main characters in multiple Shadowhunter series, and he's a warlock and immortal, so he's lived a long life, and we see different stories from different parts of his life in different centuries and all that fun stuff. I'm really excited to get to this book because unlike most of the books that I've read in my Cassandra Clare reread, this is one I haven't read the entirety of. I've read a couple of the stories, but I haven't read every story that is in this book, and I love Magnus Bane. He is one of my favorite characters ever, and so I'm very excited to read stories from his point of view and see more of his life. Although I am kind of sad because when I got my book, it does have a little bit of damage in it. If you can see, there's some damage on Magnus's face, and so Magnus looks like he's got a cut on his cheek, which is kind of sad, but what can you do, I guess? Magnus is just a little little injured in my copy of the book. Next I have Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy by Cassandra Clare, Rees, Brennan, Maureen Johnson, and Robin Wasserman. This is another collection of short stories. I can't tell you what the short stories are all about because it's a major spoiler for the Mortal Instruments, but this is one that I've read the entirety of and it was fantastic. I read it years ago when it first came out and I loved it. It was such a good collection of short stories, so I'm really excited to do this reread. This is definitely my favorite of the Cassandra Clare bind-up of short stories, so I'm really excited to get to it. And the last Cassandra Clare book I have to show you is The Lost Book of the White by Cassandra Clare and Wesley Chu. This is the second book in the Eldest Curses series, which follows Magnus Bane and Alec Lightwood. This is another one that I have never read. For some reason, I never read the Eldest Curses series. I think I kind of just didn't even know they really existed, which I'm ashamed to admit because I'm like Cassandra Clare's #1 fan. But when I went to go look up the best reading order for my reread, I discovered these. I know this book has the whole Mortal Instruments crew in this book, and so that makes me even more excited to read it because I know this book will have a lot of fun, witty banter. And this will also be my last book in my Cassandra Clare reread because I don't plan to go on to read The Dark Artificers because I just read them a year ago, so I don't really need to reread them just yet. And so this book marks the end of my year-long Cassandra Clare reread, which is also really exciting. But I do have something that I want to talk about this book. So with the second book, they changed the covers, and the publishers did this really cool thing where when you buy the book, it comes with the new cover, but it has the old version of the covers that matches the first book on the inside. So you can flip it and you can have the old covers that match the first book. I'll show you. You see, it matches. And I thought this was amazing. Why don't all publishers do this when they change their covers? Because we all know when publishers change the covers in the middle of a series, it is the most aggravating thing in the world because then you can't have all your books matching. And so I was really excited about this. And then I put the books together on my bookshelf and I was shocked to learn that they are different heights. The Lost Book of the White is weirdly, it's like a centimeter taller than the Red Scrolls of Magic. And like, it's such an awkward height because the Red Scrolls of Magic matches in height to every other Cassandra Clare book. And then we randomly just have the Lost Book of the White, which is just weirdly a centimeter taller. Why? I feel like there should just be standard sizes for books. Like for hardcovers, we have like the medium-sized hardcovers and we have the tall hardcovers. What is this? Why? Why did this happen? Why is this a thing? Why is this book just randomly taller than every other tall book in the world? The next book I have to show you is a fantasy standalone, which I love a good fantasy standalone, and that is Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. This is another book I've heard a lot about and heard really good things about, so I'm very excited that I now own it so I can read it hopefully sometime super soon. This is about a girl named Elizabeth, and she wants to be a warden. And what a warden does is they protect the world from these magical creatures that can become very dangerous. But through an act of sabotage, these dangerous creatures get released, and Elizabeth has been framed for the release of these creatures. To prove her innocence, Elizabeth has to ally with her sworn enemy, Nathaniel. And as she's trying to prove her innocence, Elizabeth starts to question everything she's ever been taught. Very excited to read this book. It sounds like something I'm gonna have a super great time reading. Also, this cover reminds me so much of ACOTAR. Like, this looks like Pharaoh, does it not? The next time I am craving a fantasy but don't want to commit to a whole series, this will be what I pick up. The next book I have to show you is a book I've been hearing so much about lately, and that is From Lukov with Love by Mariana Zapata. I have just been seeing this book everywhere and it sounds really, really good. So this is about a girl named Jasmine, and she is a figure skater, and her dream is is to be a competitive figure skater, but after countless injuries that have set her back, it seems like her dream is never going to happen. But she gets a second chance to make her dreams come true by doing pair figure skating. The only catch is that her partner is her enemy, Lukov. Again, another enemies to lovers book. I love it. I love it. I can't help it. I love it. I do have to say it is a lot bigger than I thought it was going to be. I thought this book was going to be half its size, but it's huge. This book is over 500 pages, which is really, really big for a contemporary book, but I'm also really excited about that because I really love a slow burn enemies to lovers. I think if it's too rushed, it just ruins the enemies to lovers trope, and so I'm hoping that with how big this book is, it's going to be a very slow burn. Fingers crossed. The last two books I have to show you is two other contemporary books. I have been facing a bit of a dilemma lately where I'm in a bit of a contemporary drought. I don't know about you, but I read a lot of fantasy and sci-fi and other genres, and I always like to break things up by reading a cutesy contemporary in between all my fantasy and sci-fi and historical fiction and dystopian. But the last couple of months I have noticed that I am running out of contemporary books that I have not read yet, and so I've been trying to buy a bunch of contemporaries so that the next time I want to read a cutesy contemporary I have a lot of books to choose from. So the other week I went to the bookstore and I decided to buy two contemporaries to try and replenish my contemporary TBR, and so the first book that I bought on that trip was The Flat Share by Beth O'Leary. This book is about a boy and a girl named Tiffy and Leon, and they share the same flat, however they have never met. Leon occupies the flat while Tiffy is at work during the day, and then Tiffy has run off the place the rest of the time. However, both of these characters' pasts come back to haunt them, and it makes their flat share arrangement more complicated than they ever thought it was going to be. I'm really excited to read this book. I've heard so many great things. I've heard it's really cute, which is what I love in a cutesy contemporary, obviously. The last book I have to show you is The Soulmate Equation by Christina Lauren. This is about a girl named Jess, and she is very unlucky in love, and after her latest day ends in failure, she is ready to give up on love altogether until she hears of this new dating app which pairs together couples using a DNA equation. And Jess is a numbers genius, so when she hears about this, love doesn't seem too far out of reach until she gets a 98% compatibility with the app's founder, who she knows for a fact is definitely not her soulmate. I am very excited to read this book. Christina Lauren is one of my favorite contemporary authors. I've loved every single book of theirs that I have read, and so I'm sure this is going to be no different. So that is all the books I have to show you today. Let me know what new books you have bought recently, and I will see you next time. Bye!